Hi everybody, welcome to Unit 6. This begins on page 124. Take a look at the image that covers both pages and think about the answers to these questions. Number 1, the photo shows a very early computer. When do you think it was invented? Judging from the looks of it, I would say that this computer was invented probably around, well, I know the internet was invented in the 1970s, I believe. So I would say this computer is probably from about that time, but I'm not really sure. Number 2, there is a saying that necessity is the mother of invention. What do you think that means? Necessity is a noun. You probably know the cognate, necessario. Necessity means something that is necessary or is needed by people. Necessity is the mother of invention. That kind of means that inventions are created in order to meet a need. In the video we watch, you will see exactly what that means. Number 3, what famous inventions or discoveries come from your country? And number 4, what do you think is the most important invention or discovery in the last 20 years? Why is it important? On the next page, you'll see questions that go along with the video. Here are 4 pictures from the video you're about to watch. Just think about these questions before we begin and listen for these terms. Device, device. The E sound here is like the schwa, device. Device is a piece of equipment that is used for a particular purpose. For example, a computer is a device that helps people communicate with each other. This is a tricky phrase. Prosthetic replacement. Repeat after me. Prosthetic replacement. It's a noun, it's also a phrase. So these 2 words go together to make up a phrase. It is an artificial body part, for example, one that takes the place of an arm or foot. Again, in the video, you will see a prosthetic replacement in the form of a hand. This child was born missing one of his hands, and this is a prosthetic replacement. Wrist, wrist, silent W, the part of your body between your hand and your arm. My wrist is right here. Grip, grip. A tight, strong hold on something, usually with your hand. So for my cup, I grip my cup. It's used as a noun here, so you could say, I have a tight grip. Take for granted. This is an idiom, which means it's not translatable, similar to the phrases we discussed in class last week. To take for granted something means to expect something and not understand that you are lucky to have it. So, for example, we all have 2 hands. This poor boy was born with only 1 hand. So that makes me realize that I take for granted the fact that I have 2 healthy hands. Right now, what is something you take for granted in relation to the coronavirus pandemic? Maybe up until now, you have taken for granted that you were able to go outside and go to any restaurant you wanted. Now I understand, because that's not available. I know how lucky I was to have that privilege. Pay off. This is a phrasal verb. This is exactly what we talked about last week in class. To pay off something means to bring success, especially after hard work and a period of time. In the video, you'll see this person here worked very hard to create a hand for the young child. All of his hard work certainly paid off when he saw how happy it made the boy. Crowdfunding. Crowdfunding. They say noun, but this is actually a verb. Crowdfund would be the noun. Crowdfunding is the act of collecting money for a particular purpose from a large group of people, often by asking for help on the internet. If you have seen GoFundMe websites, Those are examples of crowdfunding where people need help paying for expenses. Next, we're going to watch the video. As you watch, or after you watch, complete the paragraph with the words in the box. Then watch the video again and correct the sentences. So all of these sentences are wrong. You need to correct them by adding in the correct information or taking out the incorrect information. Now I will play you the video. I will only play it one time, but if you wish, you can go back to rewatch it as many times as you wish while completing exercises 3 and 4.
Ask first grader Holden Mora how his new hand works, and he'll be happy to demonstrate.
So, when I bend my hand in like this, it closes. When I bend it this, it opens.
At 7 years old, he's become an expert on the workings of this novel device made out of plastic for roughly $20.
It's an amazing $20.
It's an amazing $20.
And normally the materials cost about like $1,000.
He's right. Children like Holden, born without hands or fingers, in his case, the fingers on his left hand, often require custom prosthetic replacements costing thousands of dollars. But this inexpensive device was created by a college student using a 3D printer.
Builds it layer by layer.
Senior Jeff Powell studies biomedical engineering at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He took on the project after learning about Holden from one of his professors.
Hey, try that now.
He used instructions posted on the internet called the Cyborg Beast, then customized it. The 3D printer builds the parts in under 24 hours.
And at the end, you wind up with is this,
Yes.
right?
Yes. So the way this works is it straps onto Holden's hand and onto the end of his forearm. When he moves his wrist in, the fingers close. When he moves his wrist out, the fingers open.
And do that again. Do they have grip strength? So they actually do have grip strength.
Yes.
His goal? For Holden to be able to do things the rest of us take for granted.
To be able to eat dinner while holding, a knife and a fork at the same time. Be able to grab onto his scooter or his bike with 2 hands. Maybe even swing a baseball bat if we get it that strong enough. I don't want him to be limited by the condition that he was born with.
So this isn't just about a hand for him, is it?
No. It's about enabling him to do anything that he wants to do.
And the payoff for this amateur designer?
When he picked up a cup, you were able to say to yourself, hey, this worked.
Yes.
That had to be a great moment.
Yes. It's nice to see it all pay off.
Powell has now started a crowdfunding campaign to raise money so other kids can get the device too.
Well, I'm actually really happy because I think it's true that once I get the best hand, they'll make more like it for those kids. And then they'll have the best kind of hand too.
11 more children are already waiting for their new hands. For CBS This Morning, Anna Werner, Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
This side actually makes it farther.
Okay, as I said before, if you want to rewatch the video, you can. After you have completed exercises 3 and 4, you can watch this section, which reveals the answers. Holden Mora is showing the reporter his blank hand. We have hand, which is a noun, so you know that this word will be an adjective. Go back to your vocabulary. A prosthetic replacement is a phrasal noun for our artificial body part. So you can take out the word replacement and put hand. He's showing his prosthetic hand. Prosthetic. Cross off the word when you use it. Normally, a hand like this would be very blank, but a blank student made this one for $20 using a blank printer. There are 3 blank spaces here. Look for the one that you definitely know. I remember that this was a college student who made the hand as part of his class. Normally, a hand like this would be very blank, but that tells us that this is going to be opposite of this. So it's only $20. What's the opposite of cheap? Expensive. Normally, a hand would be very expensive, But this one is cheap because it uses a blank printer. What kind of printer? Cross off expensive. 3D. It uses a 3-dimensional printer. He wanted Holden to be able to do blank things like hold a bottle or a knife and a fork. Holding a bottle or a knife and a fork is a very simple thing, right? It's a very easy thing. What's another word for that? It's a very normal thing that many people can do. The project was so blank that 11 other children are now waiting for their blank hands. The project was so successful, and because of that success, more children want new hands. Now, if you put new for number 1, he's showing the reporter his new hand, and if you put prosthetic here, that's okay too. So 1 and 7 are reversible, but these are the correct answers. Successful. All right, number 1, Holden Moore is 17 years old. What is the correct number? 7. He's only 7 years old. Number 2, Jeff Powell built the hand using instructions from his professor. His professor did not give him the instructions. Where did he get the instructions from? The internet. Number 3, the printer builds the parts in 44 hours. Incorrect. How many hours? 24. Holden cannot pick up things with his artificial hand. Well, this is a quick fix. Obviously, he can pick up things. He showed us how he can in the video. 5, Holden is now raising money to build hands for other kids. That is incorrect. Holden is not the one who's raising the money. Who is responsible for raising the money? Jeff Powell. Or you could say the college student. And number 6, Holden hopes other teachers can have the best kinds of hands too. Not teachers, but children. Wasn't he adorable? We are going to jump ahead now to page 132. Before we do, though, on the next page, familiarize yourself with these vocabulary words and these phrases. These words can be used as you complete quiz 5 at the end of this unit. So we have design, develop, device, diagram, discover, invent, scientific, technology. You probably know several of those words already, but read the definition, focus on the part of speech, and keep these words in mind as we continue the unit. Now we're moving ahead to page 132. Here we're focusing on language development, uses of the verb make. The verb make has 3 main meanings: force, cause, or produce. These are synonyms for make, and they all mean different things. Force. My boss made me work late last night. You could say, my boss forced me to work late last night, but instead we say made. I often make my husband do the dishes. It's something I force him to do. Cause. Water and weights make the mechanical clocks work. You could put the word cause here. Water and weights cause the mechanical clocks to work. They make it happen. And finally, produce. The first fountain pen was made in 953. The first fountain pen was produced in 953. Can you think of another synonym for produce and made? How about invent? The first fountain pen was invented in 953. Make is also used in phrases with many nouns. These are some phrases you might have heard: someone make a decision. To make public means to bring it to the attention of everyone. To make progress, to make an investment, or to make a contribution. That's like donating money. To make a comparison, you're comparing 2 different things. We're going to use this section here as we complete the next page. Look at the sentences. What is the meaning of make in each sentence? You are either going to write cause, force, or produce. For number 1, gunpowder was first made in China. Gunpowder was first produced in China. So you write produce. Take a look at 2 through 6, read the sentence, and then try it on your own. Pause the video now and only unpause when you are ready to check your answers. Okay, let's take a look. Number 2, my professor made me rewrite my assignment because there were too many mistakes. I surely would do that. My professor made me do it. My professor, this is like my boss, made me work. So we're talking about force. My professor forced me to do it. Number 3, social media makes it easy for people to stay in touch. Does it cause people to stay in touch, force people to stay in touch, or produce people to stay in touch? First, which one of these does not make sense? Produce. So we can get rid of that one right away. Social media makes it easy for people to stay in touch. You could say social media causes people to stay in touch. Notice that the words change when I use causes. Social media causes people to stay in touch. This phrase, makes it easy, is also a phrasal verb. Number 4, today most pens are made of plastic. Most pens are made of plastic. Most pens are produced with plastic. It's literally what they are made of. Number 5, the new discovery made a lot of people very happy. The new discovery caused many people to be happy. And 6, I made myself stay up late to finish the work. I made myself do it. I forced myself to do it. Force. 2, circle the best definition for each phrase in bold. Go ahead now and try 1 through 8 on your own. Click pause and only click play when you're ready to see the answers. Number 1, if you make a comparison between these 2 TVs, you'll see that this one has a much clearer picture. If you make a comparison, you consider the similarities between 2 things. Number 2, I like both of these phones a lot. It's hard to make a decision about which one to buy. It's hard to make a decision or choose which one to buy. 3, inventions and machines designed by medieval scholars made a great contribution to society. Notice the verb tense. Make a decision, present tense. Made a great contribution. Made is past tense. B, to help to make something successful. Why is it not to give money? It says that the scholars gave inventions and machines. Those were what the things that the scholars designed. So they contributed to society with inventions and machines, not with money. This phrase can mean to donate something, but look at how it's used in the context of the sentence. Number 4, the invention of the light bulb made a huge difference in people's lifestyles. After it was invented, life was never the same. 4 is B. It made a difference in someone's life. It changed someone's life. For over a century, inventors have been making attempts to create a car that can fly, but they haven't succeeded. I'm sorry. It's late on Sunday night. I'm trying my best here. They have been making attempts. They have been trying. Later on in the sentence, they haven't succeeded. That goes with B, to fail, but making attempts means to try. So be careful not to be tricked. About 10 years ago, Andrew made a smart investment in a tech startup company, and now he's a millionaire. If he made a smart investment, he put money into something. He invested funds or money. This is a good smartphone, but they could still make improvements to it. For example, I wish it had a better battery life. We know it's not be because nothing about money is mentioned. Expensive, nothing is mentioned that has to do with money or the expense of a phone. So to make improvements, to make something better. And finally, the company announced that it's going to be acquired, but the identity of the buyer hasn't been made public yet. They'll share that information later this month. If a company is acquired, that means someone buys it. So a businessman comes in and they buy the company. If you don't know a certain word, keep reading and use your context clues. But the identity of the buyer. So if someone's buying it, it's being acquired. Those two words mean the same thing. Back to the question at hand. It hasn't been made public yet. Made public. It hasn't been shared. The information is still being kept secret. They'll share the information later this month. Information. Next, we'll have a quick review of passive and active verb forms. This can be found on page 134. And it describes passive sentences focus on what happened to something or someone. Active sentences focus on who or what did something. So for passive, it's a little bit of fancy writing. It's the result of what happened to someone. So you could say, if I wanted to talk about myself creating videos for class, I would say what happened to the videos. So I'm talking about them. I would say the videos were created. The videos were created. This doesn't give me the information of who did something. It's just telling me what happened. If I wanted to use active voice, who did it, I would say Professor Stockdale created the videos. Here I have my name as the subject, whereas with passive voice, the videos are the subject. Notice how active voice gives me a bit more information. It's telling me who created the videos, I did, whereas this is just saying the videos were created. Now, of course, you can add more details. You could say the videos were created late Sunday night. But I could also say that with active. Professor Stockdale created the videos late Sunday night. Let's take a look at the examples they give us. Passive. The digital computer was invented in 1936. Again, they don't tell us who. It focuses on the invention itself. Active voice. Alan Turing invented the digital computer. And of course, you could say in 1936, but the focus of this sentence is on the inventor. That's the information that's being conveyed with active voice. Let's try number 2. Number 1 is done for us. Apple's first tablet computer, they say develop as the verb, and they say the 1990s. In section 3, we are writing each sentence in the passive form. You're most commonly using the active form in your writing. Let's try passive. Number 2, the law of gravity. They give you the verb discover. They give you who discovered gravity, Isaac Newton, and they give you when it was discovered, the 17th century. Take a moment now and try number 2 on your own. Model it after the sentence in number 1. And let's take a look. If you started your sentence with Isaac Newton as the subject, that is active voice, active verb form. That is incorrect. We don't want the focus to be on Isaac Newton, right? We are not focusing on who did something. We want passive, what happened. So our subject here is going to be the law of gravity. The law of gravity was discovered. That's what happened. That's the event. Then we go on to include the other relevant information by Isaac Newton in the 17th century. They help you by showing you what should be the subject first. So for 2, it's the law of gravity. Now try number 3, the first computer chip. Keep in mind we're talking about past tense, so you should be using was and then the verb with an ed ending, unless it's an irregular, of course. Try now discover. invent, number 3. The first computer chip, invent, the 1950s. Pause the video and click play when you're ready to see the answer. Okay, using passive verb form, we know that we want the subject of our sentence to be the first computer chip. The first computer chip, that's our subject. Now we have was blanked. What's the verb? Invent. Was invented. And what other information do they give us? The 1950s. The first computer chip was invented in the 1950s. Go ahead and try 4 and 5 on your own. Pause the video and click play to check your work. Numbers 4 and 5 should continue to follow the formula we've been working on. Subject comes first. Make sure it's what happened to someone, having to do with the event, followed by the verb, usually with an ed ending, only if it's past tense, and followed by other relevant information, such as when it was invented or by whom. Number 4, the first smartphone was created after 1997. Number 5, penicillin was first produced in 1928 by Alexander Fleming. Word order was first produced. So you take was, the verb, but they say that it was first produced in 1928 by Alexander Fleming. Let's move on to 4. Complete the sentences using the correct form of the verbs in parentheses. Use active or passive forms, depending on how it's used. So for number 1, paper is the subject. Paper discovered in ancient China? No, paper is not the who, it's not the person that did the discovering. So we need passive form for number 1. Paper was discovered in ancient China. So you're using each sentence, take a look, decide if it needs active or passive form, and then conjugate the verb accordingly. Pause the video here and check your work in a moment. Here are the answers for exercise 4. Make sure you're paying attention to what the subject of the sentence is. For example, in 3, Imhotep, an Egyptian architect, designed the Pyramid of Djoser. He is the subject, he's a person, and he completed the action, so he designed the pyramid. Whereas number 4, eyeglasses, they did not develop to help people. Eyeglasses were developed to help people. Someone invented the eyeglasses. We don't know who, but remember, we're using passive voice. What happened? The eyeglasses were invented. Familiarize yourself with the vocabulary on page 135. Read through the words and the definitions, paying attention to part of speech. Is it a noun or is it a verb? Then we'll complete 1 through 7 together. 1. I need a password to blank the Wi-Fi connection in this cafe. Access. To access something means to be able to enter or use it. 2. Once you download the blank, you have to blank it on your smartphone. Once you download the blank, what's something you can download? An app. You have to blank it on your smartphone. Install. 3. This software lets you blank your own apps. I have some great ideas I'd like to try. Our context clues tell us this goes with the word create, to make something new or invent. In a recent study, 45% of American smartphone blank said they would rather give up their vacations than their phone. The use of the pronoun their tells us that this is going to be more than one. It's not his phone or her phone, it's their phone. 45% of American smartphone users. And it's already the plural noun, so we don't need to change it. Number 5. I always read blank reviews before I buy an expensive item. Focus on the pronunciation. Expensive. Expensive. Not expensive, expensive item. I always read product reviews. This one's tricky, but it's a review of a product so that you know if the product is worth purchasing. 6, IT, information technology, is an extremely fast-growing industry. And 7, smartphones blank us to stay in touch with each other constantly. Smartphones allow. Since that's our subject, you know a verb will follow, allow. Page 136. 6.4. You're going to hear a short introduction to a lecture, number the topics in the order that they will be discussed. So which one of these things is mentioned first? The influence of apps on our lives, specific examples of popular apps, or the history of apps? Listen carefully.
Good morning. In today's lecture, I want to discuss an invention that has changed our lives. This product has made a huge difference in the way we work, travel, communicate, and socialize with friends. Can you guess what it is? I'm talking here about cell phone apps. The word app comes from application. Traditionally, applications were used in computers to help them perform better. However, with the invention of smartphones, the word app is used to refer to phone applications. In this lecture, we'll start by discussing the very first apps and their development. We will then discuss how apps have changed our lives. Finally, we'll focus on some of the most popular apps used by people today.
Here we go. First, the speaker mentions the history of apps. She uses the word traditionally, which is a big hint that she'll be talking about history and tradition. That comes first. Second was the influence of apps on our lives. And the last thing she mentions are specific examples of popular apps. What are 5 types of smartphone apps that you think are most useful? I always get lost, so I need apps that give me directions. I also like social apps because they help me keep in touch with my friends. Notice I'm not naming Twitter here or Facebook. It's the type of app. I like social ones. What are some types of smartphone apps that you think are most helpful? Now we're going to listen to the actual lecture. Check the type of apps you listed in exercise 4 that the speaker mentioned. Listen to the lecture and complete the notes. First apps were used for accessing the something. Second generation apps, something opened in 2008. This will probably be a noun. They give you some of the notes here. In 2011, there were 10 billion downloads and people used more apps than blank. I'm guessing this is going to be a noun of some type. Maybe people used more apps than read books. More apps than books? Who knows? By 2015, blank downloads. Well, if they're showing us 10 billion downloads in 2011, by 2015, that's probably going to be a number, and it's probably going to be higher than 10 billion. That's just my guess. Here, you're making notes about the road trip before smartphones. She's going to mention a lot of things that you would have needed to do, such as going to the library and printing out directions, things like that. So here, just write down anything that you hear her mentioning in short freehand notes. So you can just put library, CDs, etc. You'll hear her say a few things in this category. Same for 8, road trip after smartphones. She'll describe the differences. How is this different than before? And fill in the blanks for 9, 10, 11. Try your best, then compare your notes to mine after.
I'd like to start by talking a little bit about the first apps. These were included with each smartphone. These types of apps were placed in the phones to help users access the internet, check emails, send texts, and so on. The first apps were designed to increase efficiency at work and allow people to access important information. However, it was the second generation of apps that really changed things. These were downloadable apps. Users simply downloaded apps from the internet and installed them on their phones. Since its introduction, the app market has grown far beyond anyone's expectations. The first app store was opened in 2008. By 2011, it was reporting over 10 billion downloads, and people were using apps more than internet browsers on their phones. And by 2015, an estimated 100 billion apps had been downloaded. These numbers have been growing ever since. These numbers give us a good idea about how popular apps are and how quickly they've developed. People from all over the world use apps for entertainment, travel, and communication. So I'm going to briefly talk about how these apps have changed our lives. It's hard to imagine life before smartphones and cell phone apps, or for those of us who are old enough to remember it. But let's go ahead and make an attempt anyway. So imagine for a moment that you're taking a road trip in the days before smartphones. Weeks before the trip, you go to the bookstore or library to get some guidebooks about the places you're going to visit. A few days before you leave, you get some audiobooks to entertain you during the long trip. You go to the store and buy some maps. Yes, the paper kind. The day before the trip, you sit down at your computer and look up the directions and print them out. Then you pack some of your favorite CDs to bring along. You also pack your camera and your flashlight in case your car breaks down. And you write down some phone numbers and addresses of the friends you'll be visiting and the hotels where you'll be staying. While you're driving, your passenger reads the directions to you and looks for street signs. If you get lost, you stop at a gas station to ask for directions. You have to write them down on a piece of paper. Okay, so I think you get the idea. Now, let's make a comparison with the same trip today. No books, no maps, no CDs, no lists of phone numbers, no friend giving you directions. The smartphone does it all. Think of the apps you'd use just for that one trip. You'd read reviews and book your hotel with a travel app. The GPS would replace the directions and maps and your friend in the front seat. Of course, a music app would replace the CDs, and you could listen to podcasts as well as audiobooks. And, of course, you wouldn't need to bring a camera or a flashlight. Yes, we've certainly made a lot of progress since the pre-smartphone days. So, now I'd like to mention another important effect of the invention of apps. It has created a whole new IT sector. It is one of the fastest growing industries, and there's a great need for skilled software engineers. But apps have also had some negative effects. For one thing, people have become more helpless because they're so dependent on their phones for information. For example, if they're in a place with no cell phone signal, they're not very good at asking for and following directions. And apps have made people less patient because they expect to have information immediately. In fact, a recent study found that 50% of smartphone users leave a web page if it doesn't load in 10 seconds. Okay, in the next part of the lecture, I'll discuss some of the most common apps in more detail.
Here are the answers. Compare your answers to mine. All of these answers are verbatim down to road trip before smartphones. So these are the correct answers. I knew it would be a big number here. I didn't know it would be 100 billion downloads. For 7, I wrote down bookstore, guidebooks, audiobooks, maps. Look up directions on a computer, pack CDs, ask for directions if you get lost, which I surely would. For 8, I said read online reviews or recommendations. You would use GPS and a music app, and you could listen to podcasts. This can be different. 7 and 8 are only the notes that you heard. So if you have fewer notes in this section, that's fine. 9, 10, and 11, these are the correct answers, non-disputable. How did you do? Lastly, you're going to identify phrases to help the audience follow the lecture. These are similar to signposting, as we talked about in class. Examples include, first we'll discuss, or I'd like to start by talking about. Look at these examples. We will start by discussing the very first apps and their development. And number 2, we will then discuss is your signposting. It leads you into the next topic. 3, I'd like to start by talking a little bit about the first apps. That whole phrase up to about is signposting. It's telling the audience what is coming next. I'm going to briefly talk about, notice how these are mostly coming at the beginning. Now I'd like to mention, and in the next part of the lecture, I will discuss blank. For quiz 5, use some of these phrases while you're speaking. That concludes our bookwork for this week. Take a look at the other YouTube video for the directions for quiz 5.